All right. We are a technology company, right? Dealing in the technology space. We're going to wait for a few more minutes as people come in here. It is just now 10 o'clock on the West Coast. Good morning to everybody on the West Coast and those in Hawaii coming on, and good afternoon to those on the East Coast. Hope everybody is having a great day. And as you guys are coming in, we are welcoming you. Thank you for coming. There is a Q&A button if you guys do have questions for us as we go along. Please feel free to ask the questions. We'll catch those as we can and definitely answer them for you. And there will be an engaging participation part as we get into this. So it's the bane of all introverts, and it's the excitement of all extroverts, right? Having an engagement part early on in the presentation. Or when we get into a big room of people and all the introverts sit in the back and you're like, okay, everybody stand up. And they're like, oh my gosh, do I really have to do this now? Or the extroverts are like jumping up in the front, like cheering for it. So it was really funny. See the dynamic of people in a big room. On webinars, it's a little different. Can't quite that dynamic as much. All right, just one more minute and we will go ahead and get started here. We got coffee on board. Feeling good about the day here today. We have StackAdapt with their fun background.
Very custom.
Yeah. Is there a story, Meredith, behind the cat in the background there for you?
I'm not too sure, actually. This is something that our design team made. They're very, very cute, though. There's a few different iterations, but I liked this one the best. It's
awesome.
Mimicking the home, but it's not mine. Yeah.
Feels very cozy for sure. I got, well, for TapClicks, we have the background here is Northern California, where our headquarters are. We have offices in Boston and in Colorado and New York, but everybody's working from home now. So we put up the backgrounds as we had done historically, but this background's from Northern California here. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Customers are not bots, as you see on the screen. Hopefully our attendees are not bots either. We will hopefully do something engaging and fun for you guys as we go through today. But we're talking about content, and everybody can use a refresher on content every now and then. Even some of the best content writers have people that look over their stuff. So one of the fun things we're going to do today is sit down with Meredith and with Elliot and talk about how content permeates the entire advertising landscape, what the new trends are in content, and how can we apply content in this new marketplace most effectively. So first of all, with introductions, I'm Kevin with TapClicks. I'll be your host here today. Please keep your hands and arms inside the car at all times, and we will be on our way. Meredith joins us from StackAdapt, and Meredith is really, her job description is very normal, but what she does is not very normal. She's really the glue that binds the sales team together with the technology team at StackAdapt and really creates super custom, engaging, fun things and programs and advertising campaigns through their clients. Her official description: she drives scalable product adoption and business growth across all clients. And she has some fun background as well. She is a sailing director, which sounds a lot more fun than some of the stuff we do on a daily basis. It's like the cruise lines, right? You have a director of fun. I'm like, I want that job. I want to be the director of fun. She's a national lifeguard also. So if any of us happen to, drown on this as we're going through, she can resuscitate us, apparently. Elliot is here from Mpath. Elliot really works on the agency side and has worked for the last 10 years in digital marketing, bringing kind of new and innovative things to the marketplace. a focus on inbound lead generation for his clients, as well as data analysis and looking at where all the, everything is coming from and what's going on. An avid snowboarder, surfer, CrossFit attendee, and yoga participant, and also chosen most likely to resemble Bradley Cooper in his high school. So, Elliot, welcome and thanks for joining us today as well.
Thanks for having me.
So here's the engagement part. So everybody stand up and shake out the cobwebs. What is your favorite spam email that comes in? We all get them, and some of us more so than others. And it seems like somebody just went down the HubSpot list of best templated emails and just copy and pasted those directly into my email inbox most days. Can we meet? Do you have 5 minutes? Those kinds are just everywhere, every day. What are some of the fun ones that you guys like? And if you're participating from home, shoot it in the Q&A and just tell us what some of your favorite spam emails are.
Something funny that happens to me quite often. There's another Meredith that works at StackAdapt, but she is the director of people and culture, so doing a lot of the HR work. So I get a ton of HR software emails all the time, mistaking me for the wrong Meredith. And so I usually fire back being like, hey, you got the wrong Meredith. And recently someone, was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's a Starbucks gift card. So, I mean, it's not always bad, but that was probably my favorite. Maybe not a spam, but do get those quite often.
That's funny. Elliot, what's one of your favorite spam emails?
Well, because I have which I'm sure a lot of this audience has the attachment of like owner or founder attached to their LinkedIn profile. The volume of I can get you 15 to 30 leads a month is like unbearable. And they all do the same thing. It's just LinkedIn outreach. It's obnoxious how they all do the same thing. And but yeah, so those fill up the inbox quite a bit. So I do genuinely love an authentic message, or at least an authentic conversation in LinkedIn when we can have one. But yeah, those have been the last 6 months of flooding.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's just crazy. And you just see them time and time and time again. And somebody somewhere thinks that it's a good idea to use that same subject line for everything that they send out. I'm like, be a little creative. The one that I do like, as we move off of our favorite spam, there's some creative ways that salespeople are reaching out. They can't go and physically meet with customers anymore. But through email, they're buying people lunch. So they're creating kind of like virtual lunches. So, let me buy you lunch and kind of meeting with them, or $25 for your time or something. Meredith, like you said, getting a gift card.
The Starbucks gift card. Yeah, exactly.
Doing something like that catches my attention a lot more. The let me buy you lunch is kind of one that seems to get a pretty good response and not super spammy. So it's just interesting how people are adapting and adjusting to the new marketplace. I think one of the ones that came in here was, should I stay or should I go? Which is a complete just direct ripoff of HubSpot or right. That's the last email you send. It's always the should I stay? And that's exactly the subject line they put in there. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're bothering to set up a sequence. Just put a little different title in there.
I know. Well, and then I love the follow-up messages that are, hey, did you see my last email? Yes, I saw it and I chose not to respond. That's literally why there's no response. So I understand though, coming from the marketing side, it's difficult. It's hard to get in front of people. It's hard to generate new business. And sometimes you just got to try different things. And, it all work. I think it all works in its own right, but it's definitely showing, the messaging a little bit more love and, coming at it from, looking at it from your customer's standpoint or the person you're reaching out to would probably certainly help with a little bit better messaging. But
that's a great segue to what we're talking about today. What is good content? I like this quote because it really kind of synthesizes a lot of what we go through on a daily basis, whether it be campaign development, ad development, or written content. Our jobs are really not to create more content, but really to create the minimum amount of content with a maximum amount of results. I worked for a company, they literally went on a binge and they would put out one press release every week.
Mm.
For 3 months, we put out one press release every week, and it was not good content. It was just crap, because you can't put out a press release every single week. Nobody can, right? Even the biggest companies that are having exciting things happen, they do, 2-3 press releases a year. But yeah, that was bad content for sure. And we paid for the press releases to go out on top of it, which was just insane. But yeah, that was craziness. You guys, you talked about some of the trends in the marketplace, and really wanted to start here. One of the unique things about content is how it drives different characteristics and different responses from people. And one of the things that I really loved early on, and this goes back several years, but BMW had an interesting TV commercial. It was this whole action sequence where the BMW car was racing around town. And I don't know if anybody remembers it, but it hits like a launch ramp, and it's like halfway in the air, and you're waiting for something to happen, and it just stops.
That's right.
And it's a cliffhanger, right? It's the greatest cliffhanger. And it says, want to see what happens next? Go to bmw.com. And it was one of the first real clear, cross-channel promotion things that I had seen out there, where you took somebody from TV and you pushed them to digital. And you saw the rest. Of course, everybody had to go to BMW then and see what the rest of the video was, and you wanted to see what happened. Just our nature is like that. But it was a really innovative way of getting people from TV onto the computer, back when there weren't any smart TVs, right? There weren't any direct connections between them. What are you guys seeing in terms of the trends of communicating, both on the B2B side and on the consumer side, as we're kind of in a new marketplace, right? Things have really changed. What are some of the content trends you're seeing? Elliot, maybe you could start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on it, a little bit from some different, some different ways that people are or some of the changes that have happened on the content side, at least from what I've noticed. From purely like when we're looking at written content, you had mentioned quality over quantity, and there's really, at this point, there's two different approaches where somebody like HubSpot has, quite frankly, probably done it one of the best, where they release a blog post every single day. They release like 260, or every single weekday. So they release 240 blog posts, over the course of a year, and it's all really high quality. They probably have an incredible staff of writers at this point, but so they've really bridged the quality and quantity gap. But what we see more now, and kind of where a lot of the trends are going, where it used to be, okay, produce a lot of 500 to 800 word articles, and that's kind of like the sweet spot to have good SEO and quality content. And now it's shifted more into like 1,500, 2,000 words. It's long form content, produce less of it, but at a much higher quality rate. And that's kind of what's working in the market now, or what Google's even considering, ranking a little bit better than a large quantity of shorter posts. So I've definitely seen the trend more into just longer, more thoughtful pieces of content. And that can be spread out. Like, obviously, if you don't have a huge team of writers, it's probably going to need to be spread out, once a week, or maybe you only do 2 or 3 blog posts a month instead of 4 to 8, because they're longer and they take longer to write and be more thoughtful. But that's certainly something shifting on, and kind of the written landscape of communicating with your audience.
Sure.
Sure. And to your point, something that I've actually been looking into recently is subscription newsletters. So it's kind of like, if you spend this time writing this quality content, that doesn't mean a lot unless you're getting in front of the right audience, right? Like, unless people are actually seeing this, and you want to make sure you're reaching people who care about this quality content. And so enter the idea of the subscription newsletter. And this is a trend that we're seeing, really high profile journalists leaving their jobs from newspapers and whatnot to start creating these newsletters that go out. And the engagement rate, on these subscription newsletters, it's a very concentrated group of people who have sometimes even paid to be on the subscription list. And so they're highly engaged with that content. So, that's also, I think Twitter's rolling that out as well, where you're going to have to pay to subscribe to certain creators' tweets. Again, really focusing on that quality content but also meeting it where with the people that actually are engaged and care about that content, right? Who are willing to pay for that content potentially in some situations as well. So I think, to summarize, the quality piece is really important, but if you're not getting it in front of the right audience, email is just one way you can do that with a really high engagement rate. There are other ways of doing that, which we'll talk about definitely later on in this presentation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean a lot, right?
The interesting thing you bring up of creating that curated audience goes hand in hand with what else we're seeing on the technology side, the marketplace, with cookies, right? Third-party cookies are going away. So how do you then leverage your content to develop first-party cookies that you can retarget against? And that's one of the great ways of doing it, leveraging content to continue to make sure that your audiences are engaged as possible and to get them to opt into this stuff so that you can retarget them and have that clean list that you're going to need in the future for those first-party cookie things.
Yeah, and on that content side too, kind of piggybacking on Meredith's conversation around what Twitter's doing, LinkedIn has done something really interesting that's been actually really quiet on their side, and I don't know if it's quiet intentional or what, but they have a newsletter feature. It's not for everybody. I don't know if it requires a certain amount of followers, if you have to have a certain engagement rate, or how they view this. But the folks who have a newsletter feature and can publish their content as a newsletter instead of a blog post, the engagement's incredible. Like, you literally engage with your entire audience every single time you post a newsletter versus a blog post or a post on the LinkedIn feed. So that just, I would assume they have something around quality built into like their algorithm of who they're letting use that feature. But that's another just another way a platform is trying to create more engaging content.
Sure. For the attendees, that I would love to hear if you are creating newsletters for your clients or for your agency, and how those newsletters are working out for you and what kind of success you're having with those. If you want to put that in a comment, that would be great to share with everybody.
The one other thing I'll say before we move on, maybe you are you're not creating your own newsletter, right? And that's okay too. Maybe you're working for a brand who doesn't have a newsletter. But what would be really great is if you could get somehow inserted into a newsletter of, an audience that's super engaged in, say, the B2B space, and you're a B2B marketer and you're trying to, push a certain type of software. And maybe they mention your product somewhere in the article, or maybe there's an ad slot there within the actual newsletter that you can reach. And with the conversation of cookies going away, this is also a really great solution, right? That this email subscription list is a very concentrated group of people, and they're very interested in B2B, enough so that they're subscribing to a newsletter. So if you're a B2B brand, getting in there, getting on that ad slot could be really powerful as well. And that's something that we're seeing definitely on the programmatic side. So sorry for the attendees that don't know StackAdapt. We are a DSP, so we work in programmatic, and we are based in Canada. So I will say sorry every time I mention something else. Yeah, so we're seeing that on the programmatic side, that email programmatic is something that, especially for our B2B marketers, right, that is going to be very hot in 2021, especially as the conversation of identity is playing into everything we speak about nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, TapClicks is a perfect case in point for that, right? We're hosting this webinar. We bring in our partners and our agencies that are working with us, and we promote you guys through this piece of content that we're putting out there, right? And similarly, in our newsletter, we have a place for our partnership program to expose the different partners they're working with and the solutions to our customers as well, so they get better visibility into everything that we're doing. It goes back to the old link sharing thing, right? For SEO, right? How you create link sharing, and that the backlinks come back to your site, and it creates better domain authority for you. Expanding that and creating different ways of getting you out into the marketplace and shared with other partners is great. So hearing what you're saying it would kind of have led up to this part of the conversation. How do we create that good and engaging content? And we mentioned a few of the different pieces, but I really want to dig a little bit deeper into focusing on a couple key areas, right? So often in marketing, we just get heads down and we have to do this so we can move on to the next topic, right? Or the next subject or the next task. And we end up in an echo chamber of our own heads, right? So we create the content all by ourselves or just looking at a blank page. How can we make sure that the content that we're developing isn't tone deaf to the audience, right? We're not creating something in an echo chamber. And then also, how can we create content that can work at various stages of the funnel so that we can create one overarching piece and then maybe break out smaller components so that you have a generalized piece that hits the top of the funnel and then other pieces that hit lower parts of the funnel as you're working through the conversion process. So I'd love to get your guys' thoughts and ideas on, how do we create better content in kind of this marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on that first. Something that we do, and I know this won't apply to everybody, but when we create content, whether it's a website or just a blog post or an interactive piece of content, what we ask ourselves is, the traditional question we ask is like, what problem are we trying to solve, or what questions are we trying to answer? But lately, what we've been doing is saying, what feeling are we trying to invoke? What do we want our customers to feel when they view our website or they read our content, or whatever the thing is? But it's really kind of centering around, and then we just focus on one feeling. What is that core feeling that we really, really want our customer to get to experience when they interact with us or our customer or whatever, or even an ad. And that really helps us kind of tailor the content in a specific way, and help not let the message get too misaligned with, screaming about our own features versus just talking about, that feeling that we're trying to deliver to our end customer. So that's really helped us kind of center our focus a lot as of late.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, from the programmatic perspective, we work with agencies like Mpath, and once we've created this very emotional message, how do we actually put it out there, and how do we know that it's resonating with the audience that we're trying to reach, right? Maybe we have, and this is where the whole concept of like A/B testing comes in. Something that we focus on quite a bit at StackAdapt, right? Say you're testing 2 different messages, which one is actually performing for you, which one is resonating, and how can you measure that? We can definitely look at the engagements on your ad, who's clicking, who's actually going to your website, who's staying there for a certain amount of time. But I think something else interesting that you could do, especially, Kevin, you're talking about in various stages of the funnel, is say you're trying to test that kind of upper funnel feeling, awareness, running something like a brand lift study, right? Trying to figure out, you can even ask someone, how does this brand make you feel, and see if your ads are actually impacting the way people are feeling, like testing that sentiment, getting data from that, and then feeding that back into your strategy, maybe further down the funnel, right? Starting out with that 2 different messages you're testing, which one is actually evoking that feeling that we want our customers to have, and then further down the funnel, follow up with that feeling for those who did resonate with, right, with maybe like native ads or display, and continue to nurture them down.
You guys bring up a great topic about feeling and emotion in advertising, and I think that so often we get stuck focused on one feature of the product or the solution that we're selling, and we get into this kind of feature selling cycle, and you start beating people over the head with a feature to the point where they're like, either I don't understand the feature and I don't want to understand the feature, it doesn't apply to me, and immediately they tune out, or that I already have it, or I already know about that, and again immediately they tune out, where an emotional appeal has a much longer play, especially as we talk moving through the funnel. Different things like even saying streamline your business, right? It's getting there, but it's not all the way there. That's not an emotional appeal. That's really more of a feature set, a result of what you're doing. So, build better community. Different things like that, I think, are really going to be helpful as people think about this. And it kind of goes to the old axiom of asking versus telling, right? Don't use cap locks when you're talking to your clients. because you're just going to be yelling at them, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be on the receiving end of that, especially customers. And in the B2B space, it's such a fragile relationship, and you definitely don't want to be seen as screaming at your customers all the time and beating them over the head with stuff, because that doesn't create the environment where they think they're going to want to buy your product or your solution or your service if they're getting beat up before they even become customers, right? How do you treat somebody? It's like the dating process, right? You're on your best behavior when you're dating. You want to be on your best behavior as an advertiser when you're creating this content and dealing with the things that are really going to make them enjoy the relationship, right? Like you said, bring in the emotional side. We
Right.
understand what your needs are.
But that actually, so that in my mind, that actually poses like a fairly significant problem long term. So this is like it goes right back to your dating scenario. And the company that comes to mind for me is StoryBrand. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you're aware of them. I'm sure. Yeah. So, and I'm sure most of the people on this call are fairly aware, since their target market is agencies. But it's all about, invoking emotions and, being the guide to your customer and their journey and being empathetic to their needs. But like, if you're like that on your advertising message or your landing page or your website, and then 2 weeks after that you've converted, you are no longer that person, the relationship doesn't last. Same thing with dating. Like, you can be on your best behavior on date 1, but if on date 3, you're no longer a good person, you're a serial killer, you're no longer a good person, like, it doesn't matter what happened on date 1, like, they don't like you anymore. So I think for, a lot of what we try to, think about is not only how do we be, have this emotional, this EQ message, emotional intelligence, empathetic, but how do we carry that long term? We don't want to lose that. We don't want to just sucker somebody in, get them to think we're like this amazing brand, or our clients are this amazing brand, but then all of a sudden there's nothing on the back end from customer service standpoint, or just a general message standpoint. So that's a really tough bridge. I mean, that's a much bigger problem to solve, being, having an empathetic marketing message versus having an empathetic brand. Like that's a different thing. But I do think they have to be somewhat cohesive, because then it comes off inauthentic. Like, you can almost feel it in the message if they're just saying things to try to make you feel something, not because they truly believe you should feel these things.
Yeah. Called cognitive dissonance, right? Where what you're feeling and what you're experiencing are two completely different things. And that's a great point. And I think that as marketers, it's important to elevate those conversations a little bit, and that message needs to permeate the different divisions within the organization, and the results are going to be there. The LTV of your customers are going to be there if you can make sure everything is synced and aligned from the marketing message to the deliverable at the other end of it. Like we said, working in an echo chamber, right? If marketing is creating this message, but it doesn't permeate the rest of the organization, you're going to have a massive churn on the other side, and you're not going to know why, because you're going to be bringing in a lot of people because they're going to love the message, and they're going to get in, they're going to turn on the back end, and you don't want that either. So
Meredith, sorry, I had a question for Meredith.
Sure.
Is there a cadence at what you've seen on the programmatic side of when to not necessarily deliver a certain message, but what channel? So like, for maybe like top of funnel ish material, does display work better than native? And then should you have native at top of funnel, and then CTV middle of funnel, display bottom of funnel? Is there anything that you've noticed on the programmatic side?
It actually leads us right into the next thing. See what you're doing. So that's a perfect segue. Thank you. I'm just gonna.
I feel like I have the presentation somewhere, but I it's just luck at this point.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time. This is something that I focus really heavily on in my role. And, what we kind of do at StackAdapt is definitely there is certain formats that work better at the top of the funnel versus the middle versus the lower end of the funnel. I mean, it depends really on which vertical you're working in, and what your campaign objective is. And so that's something that we usually help our clients meet with them and try to figure out, if I'm a CPG brand, I'm going to have a very different customer journey and a very different funnel than a B2B brand, right? Like top of the funnel for CPG, you want to reach as many people as possible. Most people will be in market for your product versus B2B. It's a very specific product. Where do you want to reach people in that B2B context? You know, it might be those email newsletters that we were talking about, webinars, right? Like those are better than CPG. But generally speaking, you know, what I like to recommend, and this is obviously something that we can tailor and test, but the upper funnel is something, if you're just trying to get, you know, brand awareness out there, kind of want to go where the consumers are going. So what we've seen over the past year is, you know, a significant shift to digital. I know that everyone on this call knows that. We're streaming a lot more video. Video is top of mind. People are on their phones a lot more. But when I think upper funnel awareness, I think OTT or CTV, you know, reaching consumers when they're in that kind of relaxed environment, more perceptive to brand messaging. Maybe they're, you know, already engaging with a show or something like that. What I really like about OTT versus, you know, traditional linear TV as well is that as a consumer, like I've gone to whatever piece of content and I've intentionally start streaming it. I'm not just like flicking through channels trying to find something to watch. So inherently, you know, those people are more engaged with the content that they're streaming. And then in that setting, you know, it's great for that kind of upper funnel awareness. Video is really engaging, obviously. I like to say, you know, if a picture says 1,000 words, how many does a video say, right? But then from there, maybe you're doing really well in brand awareness, but you still want to continue to nurture people down the funnel. I think we like to use native as kind of that middle funnel awareness. So going back to that quality content piece, you know, if you've created really good content, you want to get people to read it. You want to amplify that message across the web, and using a format like native that kind of mimics a blog post or something like that could help as well. And then display, usually we see that at the bottom of the funnel, but we can use that kind of anywhere depending on how interactive and engaging those units are. You know, we can make those units move, ask people questions in those units, get them to play games in those units. So those are really engaging as well. But typically we focus on that call to action near the bottom of the funnel. And the one thing that Elliot and I were actually talking about before we jumped onto this panel was how do these different channels interact with each other and what actually drives performance for you as a marketer. It's great to know that, you know, your OTT would be good for brand awareness and maybe native in the middle, but how do those two strategies work in tandem, right? And I think that's really where the value is. It's kind of this cross-channel, omni-channel approach. That's where your consumers are. They're on many different screens all the time, right? So what we can actually do, and what we do at StackAdapt for our clients, is look at cross-channel performance. So, you know, we can kind of look at, say your KPI is clicks or something like that. We can look at your native clicks, we can look at your display clicks, but we can also overlap them and see, you know, when you're using both formats, what is your performance like? And then going a step further, if you think about kind of like a Venn diagram and adding video on there, like how did video impact and what combination of strategies is actually working for your brand, again, in your vertical with your campaign objectives. So there's no one real clean answer, but, you know, based on what we see across the platform, we can kind of develop strategies that work within different verticals. So,
you know, one thing that you mentioned,
long-winded.
right,
Go ahead.
At the end, Meredith, there's no one key, you know, formula for it. But I think that the corollary is also true, right? There's no one destination that is superior to other destinations. So if you're just using, you know, as an advertiser, if you're just advertising on Facebook, you're missing a big audience, even though Facebook is big, right? But if you've just got one channel that you're focused exclusively on, not experimenting with other channels, is probably to your detriment, because like you said, people are all over the place. They're on their phones, they're on their TVs, they're on their computers. So we need to make sure that a cross-channel, multi-channel, omni-channel testing is part of just about every campaign, because you don't know how people are going to respond or where they're going to respond.
It's always been one of the more difficult conversations, at least for me on the B2B side, is helping clients understand that their potential customer is everywhere. You know, one of the biggest things that you hear back when you're talking to a B2B customer, especially somebody who sells, like, let's say a $200,000 product. They're like, oh, my customers aren't on Facebook. It's like, well, 3 billion people are. And I have a weird assumption that the odds are a director of pricing or a director of vendor management or whoever is probably on Facebook, maybe somewhere. And it's understanding, and then it's helping, with the message of, maybe we're not going to try to identify them on Facebook. We're going to identify them with a StackAdapt audience that gets them, to our website or, reading a blog post, and then we'll retarget them on Facebook, or we'll use StackAdapt's ability to import the Facebook impression pixel. So that way we can see who we're serving ads to, and then retarget them on Facebook or Instagram or wherever they are. But to have this like fallacy that your audience is not on these platforms like Instagram, even Snapchat. There's a lot of people who use Snapchat. A lot of people use it so they can monitor their kids' stuff. So it's not like, that's the hardest thing, is just, using data to tell you if somebody's on a platform or not on a platform, but understanding how to reach them. Like, I'm not going to go to Facebook and say, I need to find the CEO of a company with 500 million plus in revenue, in the tech space. Like, that's not what Facebook is for, but I can use the channel for a different stage of the funnel. But it's hard for clients to understand that. For marketers, it's fairly easy, but for clients, it's a really difficult conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about B2B, right? And when you think of B2B in the online space, everybody's head immediately goes to LinkedIn. But look at what LinkedIn has done to diversify their ad opportunities as well, right? They've got blog posts that they're doing now. They've got video stuff that's running. And recently they've allowed people to move off of the LinkedIn platform. It used to be everything was within their own walled garden. And now you can target people who are on LinkedIn and then find them on Facebook, right? They've opened up their API to allow you to do that. So they understand that people that are on LinkedIn also go to Facebook. They also go to Instagram, like you said. So even the core B2B things that we have traditionally relied on understand that people wander wherever the mouse may happen to take them, right? Like on YouTube, you get on, you watch one video, and 30 minutes later, you're 2 videos down, you're like, how did I end up here, spelunking in Australia? I don't know. I was looking for B2B software.
It's not a bad place to be, though.
Exactly. Let's talk about placement. We talked about a lot of different things with placement and programmatic, but email continues to be one of the powerhouses, the perennial favorites. Everybody kind of discounts it as, oh yeah, we'll just send out the emails, but it's still probably one of our best ways to target people and deliver A/B testing and bring back relevant results. How do you see email kind of factor into the rest of everything that's going on, or does it?
I mean, that's a good question. And, I think from the core of the question is, when you're talking about email being kind of the best, way of generating business, or, historically, it's actually considering then who's the email audience. Like, if you're referring to it being people who have opted into an email list and that being a great way, then I would probably tend to agree. If we're talking about purchasing an email list, or using some buyer intent data from ZoomInfo or somebody like that, and then sending cold emails, then you're talking about, obviously a completely different customer or potential customer. But I think one of my favorite spaces right now with email in mind is what you can do with that email list. I mean, platforms have just evolved. In my mind, it baffles me that somebody pays, $30,000 for ZoomInfo contacts, and then they only send them cold emails. It's like, why have they not been uploaded to StackAdapt? Why have they not been uploaded to LinkedIn? Why have you not matched their companies on LinkedIn? Why are you not targeting that list every second of every day on every platform that possibly allows you to target that customer? And so that's where I'm at when it comes to email. I think email has turned into an omni-channel thing. And I think if you have a list and you believe that list is good, you should use that in every way you can foreseeably imagine.
I see the
I
disconnect
totally agree.
between you set up an ad campaign and you run the ad campaign, and our minds get kind of focused on what that ad campaign is, and we forget to market to our existing clientele with that email list, right? So Meredith, everything comes to you and you set up this awesome campaign, and it's got video and it's got this, it's got that, it's got everything else. And then they've got this list of 50,000, 100,000 names on, sitting on their email server, and they don't touch that once, but they run everything, the other direction.
Yeah, I think like it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier. Like people spend time across the internet. B2B marketers are people like ourselves, right? We're also on streaming, reading the news and whatnot. So I'm not only checking my email when I'm looking, throughout my day, and that's not the only thing that's going to factor in, say, a purchase decision. So to Elliot's point, like you get that email list, you can definitely send emails out, but you could also take all of those emails, upload them into a platform like StackAdapt and target people across, the web while they're streaming. Like we can take those emails and reach someone who's just watching TV on their time off or listening to a podcast programmatically, right? Like we can do that now. We also talked about email newsletters. So, not only getting the email address and the list of people that way, but these kind of niche email audiences and subscription lists, and getting, your ads in there maybe, or collecting those audiences. We can do that as well through different partners. People have access to the audiences of these subscription lists. And again, amplifying that across all different channels across the web where people are actually spending their time, like on their phones, browsing, whatever. Yeah. So I totally agree with you, Elliot.
Yeah. Well, I think we often forget how many times somebody needs to see an ad or a message before they actually convert. I can't tell you how many times I've, either taken over an account or worked with a client or whatever the case might be. But, let's say we have a $10,000 a month marketing budget, and the audience pre us is like 1 million people. What's the point? You can't target, what's the point of targeting 1 million people with $10,000? Because you can't. And so, we often forget that, the audience doesn't have to be that big. Like narrow it down to $20,000, $30,000 or 20 to 30,000 people, but then target them on 5 different platforms, because that $10,000 is not going to go very far on 5 different platforms. But if it's a super narrow audience, that's a lot of messages to the same core group of people that you've basically said, I believe this is my perfect customer. Why reach another, 6 million people?
Yeah, perfect. And it brings us full circle back to the reporting part of it, right? We've set up these campaigns, worked really hard to get the right content put together, but without the reporting and data analysis, right? How good is that? And that's the point that I kind of want to close out our time with and talk about the importance of reporting. Obviously, it goes without saying, but what are some of the key things that you guys have seen in terms of the reporting? What are the key aspects of reporting that need to be focused on beyond just impressions and clicks? Elliot, you were just talking about how many times people have to see an ad before they convert, right? That the path that people take is so important, I think, for advertisers to understand, and it falls through the cracks of the reporting sometimes, right? You just say, here's the click, here's the conversion. Okay, let's do more of that. Well, there were 17 other clicks before that last click, and last click attribution only works for Google, right? It only puts more money in Google's pocket. So from a reporting standpoint, what are you guys seeing as some of the key attributions that are pulled forward into reporting for customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you were spot on with, being able to identify lead attribution. It's obviously a very, very difficult thing to do when you're talking about advertising on 5 different platforms, and, cookies now, some browsers just don't even track cookies.
Right.
So, I think that's getting more and more difficult to understand touch points. And right now, in my opinion, it's still a very expensive thing for a lot of agencies or even brands to implement. I haven't found an easy way to fully track touch points on a multi-channel journey in a cost-effective way.
Sure.
I think there are platforms out there that do it, but they are very expensive. And for larger, B2B agencies or for larger B2B clients. But I think from a peer reporting standpoint, obviously coming from an agency viewpoint, it's really narrowing in on the KPIs. It's having that conversation with the client of like, what are we trying to achieve? Do you care about monthly conversions? Do you just care about traffic? Do you really care about impressions? But just narrowing it down to 2 to 4 KPIs and using that to tell the data story. Obviously, you can look at other KPIs in different ways, but if you have a solid set of KPIs that you want to identify and that the client values that is super important, just build your story around those and let the other KPIs kind of filter into the story. But just make sure that the reporting is built around the correct story at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the storytelling aspect is definitely the most important piece, right? Because with digital, in the past 20 years, whatever, 10 years, like we now can get so much data, right? That's all, it's kind of like we have all of this data, something that wasn't accessible before when we weren't working in the digital space. But sifting through that is what's going to differentiate your campaigns and actually show performance, right? If you collect all these things and you can't show or do that storytelling, like it doesn't mean a lot. So I think personally, like to Elliot's point, identifying those key KPIs, focusing on that story, even, if you potentially don't reach the KPIs in the way that you expected to, what was going on there? What can we do to optimize, right? And the A/B testing piece, like what can we do next? This didn't work clearly, or it didn't work in the way that we expected it to. So what was off about our strategy? What was off about our messaging? Maybe we weren't reaching that feeling in our messaging that we were talking about before. Maybe it was too focused on the product itself. Like, let's try a line item that does invoke that feeling. How can we measure these types of KPIs, right? I think I mentioned before the brand lift conversation. I really like those types of lift studies, something that I work on building on the StackAdapt platform, because you can kind of remove the noise of, what else might be going on in that consumer's life and kind of look when you're comparing, say, a control group versus an exposed group, how is the advertising actually impacting them? Did we see a positive lift? Maybe we saw a negative lift. So that means that, something's off here, and it gives us more insight into better campaigns and ultimately better storytelling, right?
Sure.
And that still drives, a lot of value.
Yeah. I think that's what TapClicks does so well. We talked, Kevin, you had mentioned earlier on LTV. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, if you're coming from an agency standpoint, if you're an agency that doesn't value, the data and the transparency that Meredith just talked about, you're just decreasing your customer lifetime value. If you can be super transparent with your customer, whether it's good data or bad data, and you can tell a story, just tell a story with your data, you're inherently increasing your LTV. Because the reason why clients fire agencies is because they don't understand the value that you're providing. And if you can solve that problem, the odds are you're going to solve a lot of their headaches.
Sure. And just as a self-serving plug, our platform does pull in all kinds of data, online and offline data. So as you guys are working with your clients, whether they're pulling billboard advertising or magazine print advertising or digital advertising, right? You can consolidate all of that into a single report so that your analytics do look consolidated, and it does tell that clear, specific story you want to tell to your clients.
Totally. And we've talked about it so many times, like your consumers are everywhere, right? So it doesn't make sense to only look at, say, the StackAdapt reporting, right? You have to look at it in that bigger lens, that omni-channel approach, to really get a full picture of what's going on. So you can optimize and tell those clear stories that are going to show your value to the end brand.
Sure. Well, that is what we have for everybody today. Thank you so much, Meredith, Elliot, for coming on and for sharing with us. It's been a really fun conversation. We've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. At the bottom of the screen there's LinkedIn's if you guys wanted to connect up with either of these experts and learn more from them. Please feel to reach out to them, ask them any questions, and find out what they have. We do this once a month, and so if you're listening in, we would love to see you next month as we delve into new and different avenues for digital marketing. I do want to alert you guys, we do have a benchmark report that we just put out, that TapClicks just put out. So if you want to go to tapclicks.com, you can see our quarterly benchmark report that tells kind of what we're seeing in the market and in the industry, and trends and analysis we've seen there as well. And I think we'll probably send that as an attachment for a follow-up for you guys. If you're watching online now, thank you. If you're watching later and watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. And we're happy to take your questions anytime you guys like. But that's it. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And again, thank you, Meredith and Elliot, for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks.
Thanks so much, guys.